Hebrews 11, verse 20. While you're turning there, last time we were talking about some other heroes of faith. That was Abraham and Sarah. Last time, Abraham came from a pagan family in a pagan part of the world. A result, if you remember, of the spreading out of the people from the Tower of Babel to the different places there. But God called him out of that place, away from his family, to a place that he didn't even know where he was going when he first left there until after he left. But he is promised an inheritance and so many descendants that they'll be like the stars of heaven or the sand of the sea. For numbers, all of the nations of the earth will be blessed through one of those descendants, which we know to be Christ. But Abraham didn't live to see the land promise or that nation of people that the Jews would become. But he believed by faith that it was coming all the way up till his death there. And he focused on a more important place, the city whose builder and maker is God, and that eternal inheritance. But Abraham didn't have to actually be there. He didn't have to see those things happen to know that God was going to do them. Sarah had faith also, a little behind his. It was a little weaker at first. Her doubts, you remember, led her to try to help God and do that with Hagar, the handmaid there. But that was not how God planned it. It only caused grief down the road. We'll see that again in the lesson this evening. But even after God had resurrected their reproductive organs, allowed them to be able to have children, Abraham was going to kill Isaac at God's command. He was. He tied him up, had the knife, the wood, everything for the sacrifice, assuming that when he did it, not if he did it, but when he did it, that God was going to raise him back to life. And he were going to come back there. But God stopped him beforehand. So we move in these next few verses. These are people in the line of Abraham's descendants, still on their way to that promise of the land and a nation of people there. These people didn't get to see that either. And beginning there in verse 20 down through verse 22. Short portion of Scripture, just these three verses there. Hebrews 11:20 says, "By faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith Jacob, when he was a-dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. By faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones." Now we know that's a summary in 3 verses, but there are 3 generations that will be a part of that promise that God had made to Abraham, and it's going to keep passing down to each of them, from Abraham to Isaac, and then Isaac to his son Jacob, and then Jacob to his son Joseph. But as we said before, the writer of Hebrews doesn't need to give a lot of details about these events because the Jews know all these accounts. They know all that. They've passed that down for years there, and so they know the details. The writer of Hebrews is just pointing to the faith part of that there and as the means of salvation. But what's interesting about these 3 people is that they're giving this assurance about that future hope that God has promised to them. They're giving that to their sons either right before they die or right before they think they're going to die. And they're on their deathbed, and they're giving them one final reminder that the promise of God is still alive. It's still in effect, even though it hasn't happened yet. It will happen eventually there, and they have to put their faith in that too. What's interesting also is all of those people failed in their faith in other areas of life there. Their faith for living, but any child of God who dies with that full assurance of God's promises still leaves a witness of their faith behind to others after them. We'll see that as we go along. But here in Psalm 37:37 is a reminder of that. He says, "Mark the perfect man and behold the upright, for the end of that man is peace." And so they end their life in peace, resting in what God has promised to give us in eternity. And that's a tremendous blessing to die like that, knowing that we don't have to be afraid of what's coming or what's in the next part of life. Back there in Hebrews 11:20, he says, "By faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come." Some think that the greatest way to bless their children is to maybe teach them something, life skills, something there where they can do for themselves after we're gone. I know that for men that may mean maintaining a home, right? Learning a trade, something that you can make a living for your family, or being able to manage money or deal with relationships or whatever that may be. And those things are good, don't get me wrong. That's not the best way to bless our children, though. Others think that the greatest blessing is being able to leave their children something after they're gone, some type of inheritance, whether that's a home or some money or possessions or whatever that may be. That's not the greatest way either. Some think that the greatest blessing is being able to teach them things like sports or music or something like that. That's not it at all. The greatest way to bless our children is to give them the information about what's coming in eternity. What's coming, and to share our faith with them in a way that they'll love those things. They'll love God the way that we do. That's the greatest blessing that we can leave with them. I know some dads will share baseball with their sons or softball with their daughters or those kind of things, and because they love it. They love it, but they do it in a way that the child ends up not loving it, and some even end up hating it, resenting it there. I did some of that with my boys. I did that. Growing up, I was always the smallest in my class, growing up through school there, and always trying to play catch up all the time. I think us and Chris Blue, if you know Chris Blue, we were kind of bouncing right there at the bottom, if you know him. So that was us. But me and my twin brother, and so we were never the fastest, never the strongest, never the best in any kind of sports or anything like that. But I was on some winning teams once in a while, but it wasn't because of me. because there's some good athletes on those teams there. But I was always trying to get better. I thought, I'd like to, they'd have that field day at school, and I thought, oh man, I'd run my legs off, and I think sooner or later, I got to beat one of these guys. I've got to. Never did. Closest I think I ever got was third place or something like that, But, just trying to prove that I could win something. And I got really competitive there. And finally started catching up a little bit in size and strength there. It didn't happen fast enough for me to play sports in high school, certainly not in college, anything like that. But you get that competitive drive, it's hard to get away from that. It is there. And it didn't matter after I was grown, I'm still very competitive. It doesn't matter if it's a pickup game of basketball in my own yard or tiddlywinks. I want to win. It's one of those things, I don't know, I can't hardly get rid of it. As my boys were growing up, they were much more talented than I was when I was young. I mean, just natural abilities there. But they didn't care about winning like I did. They didn't have that drive to win and to be better and all those things that I got much later in life. And so I did what any stupid parent would do. I ruined it for them. Pushed them to do things that they didn't want to, and pay attention, you're going to get hit by the ball, get ready, get down, just constantly. I guarantee my kids would have given $100 for a gag or something for me to just shut up and let us just play and pop the heads off dandelions or whatever. Just enjoy it. And I did. I ruined that. And it took me a lot of years, and still I struggle with that. And they get to the point where they don't want to play anymore. They don't want to play with me. They don't want to play, it ain't fun. Like that, and we can ruin those kind of things. In Hebrews 10, verse 23, he says there, let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promise. Now, God can be trusted. We talked about that verse some time back there, but parents are going to make mistakes, but God can be trusted. God's not going to make any mistakes there. Isaac lived longer than Abraham did. He lived longer than Jacob did and longer than Joseph did. but we have less recorded about his life than any of the others in Scripture there. But long life doesn't guarantee that we're going to have a greater impact on the world for God. That's not a guarantee. Nor does a short life mean that we're going to have less of an impact. That's not true either. But what's sad about Isaac's life is, as a teenager there, when Abraham is taking him up to offer him there, he is a wonderful picture of Christ for us in that example. There's no way that old man could have tied up that teenager unless he did what? Let him. It's not possible there. And so he's willing to do that. And he's a very good example there of faith as a teenager. But then you get in the middle of his life and it's really lackluster at best. It's not a shining example of a man of great faith, and even a poor example at times. And we'll see some of that as we go along. And we'll be skipping around some, but hopefully we can get an idea why God uses these three men as an example. Now you back up to Genesis 26 in verse 1 there. He says, did I skip that one? Oh, skip that one. I'm going to read it to you. He says, and there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. Now, Gerar is a Philistine city, and so it's heading down toward Egypt. Now, why would he go toward Egypt? Well, famines are usually caused... What's a famine, by the way? No food. Famines are usually caused by what, though? Drought, a lack of water. And so that's what causes them. You see that several times in Scripture. Why would Egypt be a place that people would seek refuge? Because most of Egypt, if you look at it on a map, it's mostly what? Desert. Desert. I mean, lots of desert. Now, why would they go down to Egypt there? The only areas of Egypt, really, that's not desert is where? The Nile River. Along the sides of the Nile, close to the Nile, and when the Nile starts branching off into the tributaries there, going out into the Mediterranean, then there's a little wider area in there. The rest of it is almost all desert. But with that big, large river, it takes a really long drought to cause a famine in Egypt because they use the Nile to irrigate those crops with. And so it has to go way down. It's not like a Tiger or something like that where a drought would move it significantly, or even our Ohio River there. The Nile's a much bigger river, and so it takes a lot longer to make those changes. Now there in Genesis 26, 2-4, he says, and the Lord appeared unto him and said, go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. And so he's heading that direction. He goes to Gerar, Philistine territory, and he's heading toward Egypt, and God stops him and says, no, stay here. Right? Don't go on to Egypt. Stay in the promised land. And then he gives him that promise that had been given to Abraham, and now it's given to Isaac, his son. Now, Gerar isn't a really good place for a man of God to be in. It's a lot like Sodom. Maybe not quite as bad, but that's where Lot ended up in. We know that. But God's trying to keep Isaac from Egypt. And so he's close, but he's not in there yet. Now there in verse 6 and 7, he says, and Isaac dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, she is my sister. For he feared to say, she is my wife, lest he said, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. Now, Rebekah's an attractive woman. And when the Philistine men start asking about her, Isaac tells them, oh, she's my sister. Where do you get that idea from? Abraham did that. That's right out of Dad's playbook. Right? He's afraid they'll kill him if he says that's his wife and take her for themselves. And Abraham did that. Right? He did it back in Genesis chapter 12. he did it again in Genesis chapter 20 there. But Sarah, you remember, was actually taken into Pharaoh's house. She was ready to become a part of his, we call it a harem, I guess. But Pharaoh actually gave Abraham a substantial payment for her. Sheep, oxen, donkeys, camels, the works there. And that's pretty low for him to be willing to sacrifice her to a pagan king and possibly have her violated to save his own neck. But that's what he did. That's what he was willing to do. And if it was going to be between lying or dying, which one was Abraham going to choose? The lion. The lion. He wasn't going to die for her. What if Jesus had chosen something other than dying for his bride, the church, there? And he was a horrible example there. But, it may come to that point. Our world's getting crazy right now, where you may have to choose between living for God and physical death, or denying God and physical life there. But we need to have our minds made up. Regardless of what happens, we're going to stick with God. But here, Abimelech may be just a title for the king. A title there. Kind of like Caesar is. Caesar's the Roman king. There are lots of different Caesars. They use the title Caesar for a lot of them. Augustus Caesar, Julius Caesar, on down the line. And so, but here this is a title. There in verse 8 says, "And it came to pass, when he had been there a long time, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah, his wife." Now, sporting is a gentle way of saying that he's playing with her a little bit. It's not a sexual act. They're fully clothed there. But husbands do that sometimes to their wives. They'll pinch and poke and touch and those kind of things just to stir them up sometimes. There, get a rise out of them, tease them, whatever the case may be. Now, the king's looking out the window and catches him doing this. Now, I can assure you, nobody does that kind of stuff with their sister. Right? And he's told them this is his sister. Right? And he realizes that ain't no sister. They're married. That's what you do to a wife there. And so Genesis 26, 9-11 says, "And Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife. And how saidest thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, lest I die for her. And Abimelech said, What is this that thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have lying with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, He that touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." Now that's pretty embarrassing, isn't it? When a heathen man that has no connection to God has to give morality lessons to the person who does belong to God. You know better than that, to put your wife in that kind of jeopardy there. In Genesis 26, 12-16, he says, "Then Isaac sowed in that land and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. And he had possession of flocks and possession of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art much mightier than we." Now here's what's happening. He's in a temporary place. This is not a permanent home for him there. God has placed him there. Right? He's remained where God told him to, instead of going down into Egypt with the famine there. And because of his faith, God is blessing him. Now, he's using the exact same land that the Philistines have. It's not like he's in this really lush part and they're in the desert or wilderness kind of part. No, it's the same land there. But when he plants, what happens? It yields 100-fold. It's really producing well. Theirs is not there. And so he goes from prospering. Then he prospers even more. And then what happens? He becomes the richest man in the whole area. He's the richest man. And the Philistines are jealous, and they start to try to counter that. They say, oh, well, he's got the crops, and he's herds, and all that stuff's blossoming. And so to counter some of that, what do? Stop up the wells. Plugged them up, filled them up with dirt. That's what they did there. And trying to ruin that for him. Those are the wells that Abraham's servants had dug. And then finally the king says, just leave. Just leave. You're greater than us. You're wealthier than us. So you need to get out of here. And you can read in those next verses. He doesn't go far. He actually goes to the valley of Gerar. Leaves the city area there. And he starts digging wells for himself and his cattle. When he does, the Philistines fight him for it. There, claiming it's their land, so it's their water. There. And he digs 3 wells before they actually let him keep one and use it for himself. Now, why didn't the Philistines dig their own wells? Abraham did it there, didn't he? He found water. Isaac did, and he found water. Why don't they just dig their own wells? You're not guaranteed if you dig a hole that you're going to find water, are you? Or even today, if you drill a well, you're not guaranteed to find water. I know a guy that he did the little, what is it where they take a divining rod? Yeah, divining rod. And somebody come and did that for him and found the water spot, and they drilled and they drilled and they drilled. Right? They found a little bit of water. That thing goes dry all the time. All the time. And you're not guaranteed to find water just because you dig a well. How come Abraham finds water when he digs a well? How come Isaac finds water when he digs a well? God knows where the water's at. God controls whether they have water or not. That's what's going on. Genesis 26:23 through 25, he says, and he went up from thence to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared unto him the same night, and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and will bless thee, and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he built an altar there, and called upon the name of the Lord, and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants digged a well. Now he goes away from Gerar, away from the Philistine territory there. And when God gives him a place to stay, even though he's living in tents there, God gives him the same promise again that he'd given to Abraham. This time Isaac builds an altar, he prays, and then what? Then he pitches his tent. Then he digs another well. He does those in that order. Right? And so, if we want God to continue to bless us, we have to stay close to God, don't we? We have to stay in God's house. We have to stay in God's Word. We have to stay in communication with God. We have to do those type of things. What's secondary to that? Our homes, our jobs, our things. Those are all secondary things to God. God should be the priority all the time, whether you're at work, whether you're at school, whether you're playing, whatever the case may be. Genesis 25, I know we're going to back up here just a little bit and see Isaac's faith again there, but Genesis 25:20 there through 23, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Padanaram, the sister to Laban the Syrian, and Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived, and the children struggled together within her, and she said, If it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. Now, how do we know that Isaac's faith is real? Well, Isaac's wife was barren. Right? He prays, and what happens? She gets pregnant. And when she's pregnant, I saw some showing ultrasound pictures there earlier, but they don't have no ultrasound pictures. All they can do is they can feel the baby moving, those type of things, feel it kicking, those kind of things. She got 2. And it's like they're fighting. They're like they're having a wrestling match or something in her stomach. She knows that ain't right. That's not normal there. And so she's worried about that unusual activity. She prays and asks God, and God explains. These 2 people inside of her will become 2 nations there, and the younger will rule over the elder. And so that's evidence of their faith. God doesn't listen to the prayers of unsaved people, does he? No, not unless they're praying for what? Salvation, to be saved. That's the only prayer God listens to. Right? God doesn't hear the prayers of Christians if we're what? In sin. In sin. If you've got unconfessed sin, God's not hearing those prayers. He's not listening. So we know that he does belong to God, and he's in fellowship with God this time. And so you skip ahead, you see the two boys there in Genesis 26, 34 and 35. He said they're grown now. Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Beshemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, which were a grief of mind unto Isaac and to Rebekah. So Esau has two God-fearing parents, and he goes and marries not one, but two women among the heathens, ungodly women. Now you can look at Hebrews 12 and verse 16 and see this about Esau. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. So Esau is a profane man. He's a heathen. He's a wicked man. He's not a believer in God like his father and mother, which is why they're so grieved. It's not just about the marriages. It's about his lack of faith there. In Genesis 27, verse 1 to 4, he says, And it came to pass that when Isaac was old, and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Isaac his eldest son, and said unto him, My son. And he said unto him, Behold, here am I. And he said, Behold, now I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, and that my soul may bless thee before I die. Now, even though God had already told Rebekah that the older son would serve the younger son, and that he would be the heir of the promise of God, he would be the one that it would pass through, who is Isaac going to give the blessing to here? Esau, the oldest. He's going to give it to the wrong one. He's going to confirm the right of the firstborn to that eldest son. Now, Esau's already sold his birthright. You remember he came in from the field, he was starving to death, and Jacob had soup ready, and he says, Oh, give me some of that soup, I'm starving to death. And he'll sell me your birthright. Right? What's he say? Oh, what good will it do me if I die of hunger? Right? And he does. There. You see that back in chapter 25, but he was sacrificing future blessings for something in the present. Now, when Jacob's mom, Rebekah, hears what Isaac has told Esau here, she starts devising the plan to get the blessing for Jacob instead. Now, Jacob doesn't need to do this. He doesn't. This has already been established by God. That's enough. But his faith is weak here. All this is going to do is cause animosity between those two brothers that's going to last for years after this. We've already seen that, where a person of faith is trying to help God with his plan by going outside of faith. And that's what Sarah did when he offered Hagar to Abraham to have the child with. And now Rebekah is going to do something, trying to help God with his plan. Same thing, though, outside of faith. Now, Esau's a worldly man with worldly wives. But Isaac likes him better because what he gets from him. He likes the meat. He likes the game animals there. And even though God has already determined the end, Isaac's going to ignore that. And he's essentially saying, this is the man that I want to lead our family going forward. Esau is the ungodly one there. In Genesis 27 there, 11 and 12 says, And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon, I shall bring a curse upon me and not a blessing. Now, you read those verses around that, you'll see Jacob's okay with the lying and the deceiving part. He don't have a problem with that. What's he have a problem with? Getting caught. Getting caught. Bringing a curse upon himself from his father. If I get caught doing this, How would I get out? And every excuse that Jacob gives for why it won't work, Rebekah's got an answer for him. She's got a solution there. And even when Jacob brings the meat that she's prepared, she just took a kid of the goats there and made it taste like the other game meat there, the way he likes it. But Isaac is shocked that he's been able to kill it so quickly. And this is what he says there in Genesis 27:20. And Isaac said unto his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. Isaac's eyesight has failed. He can't see Jacob. Jacob has on Esau's clothes, so he smells like him. There, you remember they put the animal skins on his hands and the back of his neck so he'd feel hairy like Esau is. Now, he doesn't sound like Esau. Isaac does recognize that. He says, sounds like Isaac's voice. And he smells him, feels him. And 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? So he believes it's him there. But you remember, Abraham was going to bless the wrong son too. He was going to bless the wrong son. Back in Genesis 17:18. And Abraham said unto God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before me. Now, Ishmael's already 13 years old when that happens. Isaac hasn't even been conceived yet. And so Abraham's hoping that God would just use the son that he's already got there. Are we really going to take a chance on having another one and going through all that again there? And so when Esau actually returns from the hunt, Isaac's shocked to have him come again, because he thought he's already been there once, and brings some more meat there. But Esau claims he's been cheated twice now. Once with the birthright, now with the blessing. Now it took a while, but Isaac finally realizes what's coming, just as God said it would be. It's going to pass through Jacob. There in Genesis 28:1-4, he says, And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessing of Abraham to thee, and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. And so Jacob was a man of faith, and he needed to marry a woman of faith. That was important there, not one of the heathen women. And so that brings us to the next one, Hebrews 11:21. This will go much faster than Isaac's, but Hebrews 11:21, he says, By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. Now, Jacob's not a blazing example of faith either for a lot of his life, but it is still there. In Genesis 28:11-14 says, And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Now God's given him the same promise that he gave to Abraham, and then to Isaac, and now it's passed to Jacob. There, skip down to verse 19-22 in Genesis 28. It says, And he called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of that city was called Luz at the first. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee. Now he calls that place Bethel, which means house of God. But the house of God is where God meets with his people. The house of God is where we bring our tithes, right? 10th of our earnings, our increase there. Now, why does Jacob do that here? Because God hasn't actually commanded tithing yet. It's not actually in the law yet. Now, Abraham did it. You remember? He did it to Melchizedek. And now Jacob's doing it. And it's because God's laid it on their hearts, even before they were given that command and the promise of blessing for obeying it. Now, if you remember the account, after deceiving Isaac, Esau is furious. Rebekah sends Jacob away and says, "Oh, he'll kill you. Just go to your uncle's house. Wait for a few days till he calms down. I'll send for you and you'll come back." Does anybody remember how long that few days ended up being before he returns home? Nope, longer than that. 20 years. 20 years. 7 years for Leah, 7 years for Rachel, and then 6 for the crop or the herds and those type of things. So he's there 20 years before he returns home. In Genesis 32, 9 to 12, he says, "And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast shewed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands." You remember he takes his 2 wives and separates them. Puts them in different groups in case Esau does what? Attacks and kills one. The other ones can at least try to run, get away. You ain't going to have them all there trapped in one place. He says, "I am become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." Now, Jacob prays for God's protection, and then he reminds God, hey, you remember, you promised me that our seed would be the descendants. Our seed would be the one that passes that promise from Abraham on down. And so he does continue in faith. And near the end of his life, Jacob passes this on to his son Joseph. And Joseph brings his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And so those should sound familiar because they're 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel. Remember, the Levites don't have inheritance. They don't have land inheritance. And so Joseph would have been the 12th tribe, but when you take Levi out, that leaves 11. And so Joseph's 2 sons become those 2 tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, in place of Joseph and the Levites. There, in Genesis 48, 1 and 2, he says, "And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, Behold, thy father is sick, and he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, Behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed." And so he props himself up there on the bed. He knows they're coming. His eyesight's failing also there. He's called Israel too. That's the same person, Jacob and Israel. Then in verse 12 through 14 of Genesis 48, "And Joseph brought them from out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn." Now, normally, there the right of the firstborn traditionally would go to the oldest son. If he was going to honor the father, if he was going to lead the family in the right direction, they would honor him. If not, he would bypass them and go on to another one. But what's happening is that he's placed the sons, Joseph's placed the sons there so that the right hand will be on the oldest and the left will be on the younger. And when he gets there, he crosses them. He puts his hand on this one and this one. And so that's what's happening. And he doesn't do that by mistake there. It says he's guiding his hands wittingly. He knows what's going on here. Down in verse 17 through 21. "And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless thee. God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you, and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. And so Jacob, or Israel, is saying near his death, I'm dying, but God's promise still stands. It's gone from Abraham, it's gone from Isaac, it's gone through Jacob, and now it's passing on to Joseph there. He says it hasn't happened yet, but he's still got the faith in that promise there, even though the next generation won't live to see it either. There. Back in Hebrews 11:22, that last verse there, he says, By faith Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandment concerning his bones. Now, Joseph did show much more faith than the others during his life, much more so than Isaac or Jacob. But the faith that stands out for all generations is the part about the promise of God. The land inheritance, the future blessings, the Messiah that would come through the sea, that all nations of the earth could be blessed there. And that faith endured through the end of Joseph's life also. You remember Joseph was sold into slavery, ended up in power in Egypt, and that's where he died. He died in Egypt, not in the promised land. Right? But he has so much faith in what God has promised. He says, when you leave Egypt, when the nation leaves Egypt, take my bones with you. Tell you, I want to be buried in the land that God's promised there. Take them to the promised land. In Genesis 50, last few verses here, he says, And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. And so he still kept his faith all the way to the end of his life, even though he didn't see those promises, just like the other ones there. But we're going to have times in our lives when our faith is going to grow weak, when we're going to have some doubts about whether we can follow God's plan or not, whether we can trust God in this area. And sometimes we're going to have no faith. We're not going to believe at all. We're going to choose our own way, do those kind of things. But our faith about eternity should never go away. We should be more sure of heaven every day the closer we get to it, whether that's through our death or through the rapture of the church, the surety that we're going to receive rewards from God in eternity. We're going to have a place in heaven. We're going to be a part of the earthly kingdom when Christ comes back, and the eternal kingdom. All of that stuff is sure, and those things are what we need to pass on to our children. You see in the world, and even among Christians today, the focus gets closer all the time, doesn't it? What's happening now? People are living for now. I see people all the time, young people. I know Parker and Isabel's just married. I'm not talking to you guys just because you're newlyweds and you're young. But I see this a lot, where people get married and they want to drive new cars, and they want to have campers, and they want to have boats, and they want to have a swimming pool in the backyard, and they want to have all those kind of things. And it's short-sighted. And they'll bury themselves in debt. And they got to work every hour they can get a hold of, and they're not saving, they're not planning, they're not doing those kind of things. And what happens when you get old? You end up broke. You end up broke because you've invested everything here in the now. What's worse is Christians do the same thing, where we invest all our time, all our energy, everything. We pour it into our kids, we pour it into our job, we pour it into everything. And we're not investing in eternity. We're not laying up treasures in heaven. And so what happens if you invest everything here What happens when you get to heaven? You still got a place there if you belong to God, but what happens when you get there? What do you got there? You're broker than broke. You're going to have the crown of life. You're going to have a home there. But far as treasures there, it's going to be minimal. Minimal. And that's the direction the world's coming. You see Christians that aren't concerned about other Christians. Helping people become Christians, what I mean. They're not concerned about those things. They focus everything on here, everything on now. What's happening next week? How can I get ahead in my job? How can I get my house paid for? How can I get my retirement set up? How can I get that? And it's okay to plan for those things, but it's more important to plan for eternity. Okay, we'll see some more next time, Lord willing. Any questions or comments, though, for this evening?